Alright, secondly, we're going to do a review on the Honda Grom, why you should have one, and a couple of little mods that I did that maybe you might want to do too. So, reason number one. We're just going to set it down like that. Set it down on its side. This is the most bulletproof motorcycle on the planet, except for maybe a KLR 650. But the reason why this edges the KLR 650 out, especially if you're starting to get into riding, depending on what you're doing, the KLR 650 and 250 are awesome bikes, but look at this, one hand. I think I put the kickstand down. See, look, like I couldn't have done that with another bike. Be like, oh fuck, I forgot the kickstand. So I can put the kickstand down there. Boom, there she is. Guys, this Grom has had, as far as the engine goes, it's had a great life. I haven't like abused it engine-wise, but it's had a couple of low sides, man. And I never actually low-sided any bike at all until I took this thing to the track with stock suspension and stock tires. The tires being the weakest link, the suspension being maybe tied with the weakest link, but I'm going to go over stuff like that. Shorty adjustable levers, which is good because you definitely want some steel brake lines, which is an easy thing to do. All you need is you can go to Walmart and get a Stanley like $20 wrench set and you're good to go. You can swap that stuff out. Well, you need a brake fluid, like change and pump, but it's nothing. You take this little guy off, you take your little wrench, if I can get the fucker off. Well, man, I wasn't ready for this. I just kind of do all this at the drop of a hat, man. This isn't really like finally done, but this little cap comes off pretty easily. You take, see, and you put the pump up here, you put a little pressure on the pump, and you crack this guy open, and you drain the brake fluid out. It's easy. It's one of the easiest things. It's probably easier to do than changing the oil, or just as easy. Oil changes are also a pinch, and the Grom actually doesn't have an oil filter. There's a little oil screen in here, and you only really have to do it the first time, and after that I wouldn't worry about it until 3,000 miles, because I've never actually seen any shavings or anything caught. And I just run like castor oil, ATV oil, you know, like I don't even run like motor oil. And if you want to run that, that's fine, you know, nothing against that. I just don't. But this Grom here, man, this Grom has been a trooper. Not that I've, like I said, not that I've gone out and beat it up and wrecked it and shit hardcore, but I went to the track and I low-sided it a few times because you can see the tires there. I've pretty much maxed this side out. A lot of that is just wear. Here's actually the part where I hit its limit. Over here on the left side, and I'm weaker at left turns, which I don't disagree that if I was better with my lefts, then I wouldn't have ran out of tire, but you can actually, I don't know if you can see it, I've run out of tire on this side, but I do blame that more than anything on the tires and suspension. This is the tires that the special edition Grom came with. They're not the V-rubbers. I don't recommend running V-rubbers on the track at all. My buddies are running Kenda KD1s, I think they are, and that seems like a very nice tire. Every time I tried to get low on the bike, it would buck around, man. It was like riding a Bronco. So, but they're great for the street. But the one thing you definitely want to do first to your Grom is, luckily I didn't know how to do it, but I had a buddy, at the time anyway, and I had a buddy that was like, man, have you changed your fork oil? And I'm like, no, I sure haven't. He's like, come on, bring that shit over, we'll change your fork oil. I was like, alright. So he put a thicker fork oil. I'm not sure what it is. If I find out, I'll put it out in the description. If not, just look it up, you know, like Grom front fork oil change. You just put a thicker oil in there. And now the thing, I'll try to get this set up. Now the thing does not bottom out. I mean, not, if you hit a bump at like 60 miles an hour, maybe it will, but it just doesn't bottom out. Parts for this Grom are cheap. You have a crazy reliable, it's based on an ancient design of Honda's, like from the 70s, I want to say, 125cc, and what's different about it versus a dirt bike, you don't really have to rebuild the engine every 50 hours or whatever. It's pretty much good to go. It wouldn't even shock me if this made it to 40 or 50,000 miles. I have a few buddies I know that have got more than 10. One of them's got like 15,000 miles on their Grom, and there's some people out there that have like 40 or 50,000 miles on their Grom, like all original engine parts and still running. The brakes are fine. Definitely recommend steel brake lines, steel braided brake lines. Just make everything feel nice and crisp, and the bike stops way better. And since the suspension doesn't bottom out when you get on the brakes real hard, it works even better now. But this bike gets, I think it's safe to say, 90 miles per gallon or better no matter what. Probably no matter where you live, no matter your weight, it's going to get at least 90 miles per gallon. I've yet to have a tank that I've actually recorded that got less than 105 miles per gallon ever. Definitely want an exhaust. That's going to be one of your things that you want. I do miss my factory exhaust sometimes. These things are actually great in the woods, and that's where I'm getting to with the factory exhaust. When I first got it, we would go in the park here in town and ride them, and now it's a little bit loud. I've done it a few times, never had any problems. Nobody really seems to care. But it is nice having that pretty much silent exhaust, because you're like, really, nobody's, even if people see us, they don't give a shit because we're not really bothering anything. They're a lot of fun off-road. You do not need off-road tires to run this Grom off-road. It is not a dirt bike, and what I mean by that is it can't really handle the jumps a dirt bike can handle, but other than the jumps, it can do anything a dirt bike can do. At least of this, 125, 150 cc dirt bike, it'll do everything a dirt bike does. Probably just as well. You'll probably just wreck it less, but for me, the fun button is definitely the back brake on the Grom. Man, I lock up this tire every chance I get, and I've got, I don't know, I want to say 3,500 miles on this Grom. Let's look. Yeah, 3,455 miles, and I'm still in my original back tire, and this tire has not had an easy life. I've done burnouts in it. Actually, in the garage, there's a mark from it right there. But the garage being one of only a few places, and the tire is still held up well. It's wearing a little bit, but it's actually still good, still very good. And I've got an extra one right here, which is a Michelin Pilot Power SC, and that's probably what I recommend for all-around riding. Something like this. This should be even a little bit grippier than the one I have. If you're going to go to the track, definitely get the Kenda KD1s, because I've just seen what they do, and they give you just a crazy amount of traction. The second thing, I've kind of got this set up right now. I have a phone mount, which was like 20 bucks on eBay, and I also bought one of these guys that hooks up to the battery, and I can just, where is it? Just plug my little iPhone charger in here, put my iPhone in there, plug it up, and I have it directly hooked up to the battery, not on a switch or anything, so I can just let my phone charge even when the bike's off, which is really convenient. And let's see, I'm still on one tank. It only holds, I think, 1.2 or 3 gallons on a tank, and right now I'm on 16.8 miles since my last fill up, but that's really not true, because the last time I actually filled it up was at the track, and I got it to where it was like a bar or two below full, probably 2 bars below full. Either way, guys, literally just out of fun, when I was working at the car dealership, I would go to where we traded in cars, get change out of their cars if I didn't have change on me, which I usually did, but I would get change out of their cars, and that's how I'd fill up my Grom for the week, just because it was funny, not out of like a necessity or anything. But and there's Keanu Reeves, he keeps us safe always, and that actually occurred at the track. But here's a testament to how strong the Grom is. Lick the old finger and watch, this stuff will actually rub off. So you can see, that's merely scuffs. It just, you lay the fucker down. I actually let it down 3 times. I'll explain the third one in a second, but lay the thing down and it just comes back for more. The only thing that got chewed up was this, which is an aftermarket peg, and I would recommend these. These are $25, and they're just called raised Grom pegs. You can Google it and find out what it is. But it did that, and that's only because I low-sided. That's not actually from dragging it on the ground. The problem I had before with these pegs, and I think I've got one laying around. Hopefully it's the, well, you can see either way. With these pegs, once you get good enough at riding, well, or confident enough, whatever, however you want to put it, you'll actually grind down that little nut, and it just drags, and it's annoying because it's like, oh shit, I don't want the peg to like catch a crack in the ground and like pull the whole bike down, which was a concern. You simply won't have that, and I'm actually not on the highest setting. It could go, instead of being on this first pin down, you could go to the second pin and raise it even higher. I didn't like that. It was too much angle difference to the rear brake, which I'm a big fan of the rear brake. But the Grom, we actually had this conversation a few times, and a lot of us have a 600 or bigger bike. And sorry, my garage looks like shit. So it's actually my parents' house, and every time I get this fucking place cleaned, they find a way to ruin it. So, but either way, and I just did some wire loom here on the Grom, the plastic dip everywhere. But the Grom will make you a better rider. And I think that's something I haven't really heard anybody actually talk about, even on all these Grom reviews and everything, because the bike is so forgiving. And it's actually plenty fast to like 40 miles an hour. After 40, there's a little bit of room to be desired, I'll just be honest. But the best way to own a Grom is to have a Grom and then have a bigger bike too. That's really the way to do it. And if you have the Grom and a bigger bike, you'll never contemplate selling the Grom out of like boredom. It might be financial issues, you know, and we all go through stuff like that, but highly recommend the Grom. I would definitely keep it. And another thing, man, you can literally, like, my mom's car here and stepdad's car here, which his is way more capable than ours for towing stuff, but my car, eventually I'm going to put a trailer hitch on it and have a little, you know, like a little motorcycle trailer, which it'll pull the 600, no doubt, no problems at all. But I'm actually gonna use it primarily to tow the Grom, because the Grom is just a whole nother asset. We actually had a story where my buddy's 07 4Runner broke down because the alternator died on it. But luckily we were carrying a trailer full of Groms, so we really weren't stranded. And he actually strapped the battery to the back seat of his Grom. Well, actually he has a sub cage back here, and he actually strapped it down to the sub cage and the back seat. And that worked great. And I highly recommend sub cages. I just haven't wanted to spend the money on them. But definitely a sub cage. The other stuff down here is cool. But if you get bars wide enough, especially in conjunction with a sub cage, if I had a sub cage, I never would have tore up these. Oh, another thing. Your stock pegs. The only time my Grom has ever left me stranded is when I wheelied it too hard and I had a little bit too many driving whiskeys. But I wheelied it too hard, and actually when the stock when it goes down and it has stock pegs, it'll actually snap right here. It's just a stress point on it, and it'll break this whole rear set. Not that that's a big deal, because they're only 28 bucks. But if you're going to be stunning your Grom with factory shit and no sub cage or anything, I definitely recommend buying at least one of these. They're like 28 bucks for the OEM Grom one. This is actually a brand new one relative to my Grom. And yeah, so it did that. Not that that's a big deal, but you can't shift. When this is broken and just hanging here, you don't really have anywhere to leverage this guy against, so it's just hanging down there. And I had to actually, like, I think I might have moved that with my finger, I don't remember, maybe my foot, but I had to shift it into second so I could limp it back to my girlfriend's house. But other than that, man, I didn't hurt the bike. You know, I put the new rear set on there, and actually the shifter didn't look like shit until the second or third time I low-sided it at the track, and really that was just me pushing the Grom beyond its abilities. Stock, I just kept getting faster and faster and trying to keep up with my buddy who's got like a tracked out Grom that has like the upgraded wheels and tires and brakes and suspension. He has the Kenda Katie ones, and I couldn't believe it because we got back into my buddy's, I call it a Dakar response vehicle, got back into his trailer, and his tires are still like almost hot to the touch, and mine are like cold. And he was actually after the track, he pulled into the trailer before I did. And I was like, damn, no wonder you were able to grip and not fucking go down, because I just kept pushing it, and I pushed it a little too hard. But again, I didn't really care, because you're not really going to hurt it or yourself if you're wearing full leathers at the track. But the handlebars took the biggest impact, and these have been troopers. These are track sides, and they were literally $19.99 at Cycle Gear. And there's been a few times I've low-sided it and I bent them. But every single low side that I'm aware of that I've done, even when I wheelied the Grom too hard and it went down on its left side and broke that rear set, it bent these handlebars, and I would simply lock it out like that and just bend it back into shape. You know, it took a little bit of force, but it was still kind of funny. But the Grom is rock hard reliable if you're thinking about selling it because you want something faster. Well, it's not a very fast bike. It's definitely not something I'd want to get on the highway or interstate with on the regular basis. You know, you definitely want like really at least a 250. But the long scheme plan with this is to eventually, not today, not tomorrow, but eventually, you know, in the few years down the road, is 300 swap it. I feel like that would be pretty cool. But for right now, I'm just enjoying it for what it is, because I have that if I ever have, or that if I want a need for speed. And but it's a good bike. Eventually I'll upgrade the rear suspension. But another thing, I've noticed a lot of people who sell their Groms didn't really get involved in the Grom community around them, and some places just don't have them. But I would think any metropolitan area, you know, New York, Austin, Texas, Dallas, Delaware, Philadelphia, Miami, Mobile, Biloxi, just to name just a few, any kind of major city is going to have at least an active Grom community. And that's really where you want to get with. And some of my best friends I've ever made have been because of my Grom. And if it weren't for my Grom, I wouldn't have these friends that I have now, you know, and that was going on 3 years ago now. So I like my Grom a whole lot. If you're considering get a Grom, they're not very expensive. They're low cost, man. And what you do, if you financed yours, like I did mine, it's now paid for, but if you finance your Grom, and I did this for the last like year before I paid for it, put liability on it after you do it. Put liability and comprehensive, which liability is, of course, if you hit somebody else, you know, it'll pay for their thing. Not that you could do a whole lot of damage to somebody's vehicle in a Grom. But comprehensive is if it gets stolen. So those are the main things. And liability and comprehensive, ever since I was 25 years old, it was $7 a month with a $1,000 deductible. But I'm not going to spend, you know, more than $1,000 repairing this. So if it's stolen, $1,000 just pays for itself. And having said what all it's been through, it still looks great. I mean, it's fine. The biggest thing, I went down one more time. This guy on a Ninja 300 cut me off, and he cut me off on the inside of a turn, and it just kind of spooked me. You know, it was my first track day that I've ever been to ever in actual real life, and it spooked me, and I just stood the bike upright and was slowing down, and I ran off the track. Not that that would have even done anything, but it had rained like hell for like the past 5 or 6 days. And this place was ultra muddy. And so when I ran off the track, I ran off into a bunch of mud, and somehow or another, I guess I hit the brake and the front wheel locked up on that super slick mud, and I washed out. And I had some jackass. He was like, "Yeah, you were like right in the danger zone where you could have been hit." And I was like, "Danger zone!" But I was like, "Dude, I couldn't fucking get moving. You really think I wanted to just chill out there, like where people could wash out pretty easily?" No. I was like, but I mean, it took me a second to get rolling. Because I mean, the slick tires do great, but I mean, I don't recommend them for mud. And to be honest, that's the worst mud I've ever been in. Was that time when I went out, because I usually just go around it if you're off-roading on these, which are great for. You just go around the hardcore shit. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've done to it, man. Just a little cheap exhaust. That was an SC. It was a knockoff SC exhaust, and steel brake lines, and I just got some, what do you call this, wire loom, and I plasti dipped the wire loom white to hold the green. Plasti dipped it white first. Then I hit it with the high vis, yellow or green, depending on what your eyes see. And then I let both of those dry first before I hit the other one. And then I just clear coat it once or twice. And this is actually almost 2 years old. And I didn't do that great of a job when I first did it. I've actually got more wire loom over here. But I figured that one hasn't seen the best of its days yet. But I've actually got more wire loom here. That's much nicer as far as the paint goes. I kind of did this in a hurry. I think I was going to go meet some of my buddies. And this is actually pretty good. There's that spot right there, but I'm going to put that towards the engine side where you won't see it. So all this is actually going to look good. And then I like the colored zip ties. So that's what I did. But phone charger is pretty important. And I actually don't really have a designated phone holder on my 600. But I have one on my Grom, probably because we're out fucking around more in it. And this, same thing here. I plasti dipped it. I cleaned it first, alright, with like rubbing alcohol, which is what I recommend. I didn't actually do that for this, but I did it for this because it's easier. But I alcoholed it, plasti dipped it green, or I'm sorry, I plasti dipped it white, and then I plasti dipped it green, and then I clear coat it once or twice. And that was actually, that's the original. That's been on here since like February or March of 2017. So we're going on 2 years, and I've never touched this up again. This other one here, same thing, and the lighting might not be that good, but it's actually a thicker coat than the other one is. But this all happened when I went down in that whatever, but it also protects the paint or the plastic. I mean, up underneath this, I could peel all this plastic up off at any time and it would look great, but I'm not going to worry about it for now because I kind of like the rugged look, and this is cracked at this point. But a replacement for this is probably $10. So, you know, you get where I'm going with this, hopefully. I don't care, and I don't really plan on selling the Grom, and the worst thing that could ever happen to it to like make it quit running is you have to buy a new motor, and a new motor is like $400 on eBay. So there you go. If you're thinking about getting a Grom and you're kind of unsure, definitely get one, because it's going to make your skills better. And here's another thing, man. I've like beating around the bush on everything else, but what I first started doing with them is like, you just set up a cone course. Go and buy a couple cones, and look, I have the cones to prove it. Which are definitely not from my soccer days. That was a long time ago. But you just get a couple cones like this, and you just set them up, you know, and you could even do it here. That's a little bit narrow, but you can go out in the cul-de-sac or just in a parking lot, or a parking lot after hours, or an abandoned parking lot. Set up some cones, man, and just do figure eights around them, and it'll make your skill level so much better than it would be. And then, you know, then you're ready to go out and do that on a bigger bike, like my 600 or your Harley or whatever you have, or your FZ07, which would be a really cool bike. Oh, another thing, the FZ07 is basically a big Grom. I don't know if you've seen it, but it is so similar to this bike. The tail end and everything is so similar. And the FZ09 is where it really looks like a miniature FZ09, which is kind of cool. I never even thought about it until I had a guy I worked with had an FZ09, and my Grom was parked in front of his. And I was like, damn, they look like the same bike. He's like, they really do. I was like, huh, how about that shit? But man, they're fun bikes. If you're thinking about getting one, get it. If you're thinking about selling it, hopefully you live in a community that's like active enough with other Grom people, and if you don't know them, get involved in it, and just try to get better at your skill set, and learn to use the back brake, because on the Grom, the back brake is very important, because that is actually called the fun button. That's where you lock the shit up. And man, I've had a couple times where I've almost wiped out just locking up the rear brake. Not so much anymore, but when I was first learning, and it never happened just because they're so forgiving. So if you don't have one and you're thinking about getting one, get one. If you're in between this and something similar, like a CBR 300F or a CB 300F, whatever they're called, it's kind of a hard one. If the Grom, if you know the Grom is not going to be your only bike, or it's like a fun bike, then get the Grom. But the CB 300F is really like a larger Grom, but it's more suited for if you're doing any kind of commuting, like not in town commuting. This is the best in town commuter. I mean, for me to get one point of town to the other, and the top speed limit is 45 miles an hour, I can do 60 miles an hour all day long. But I wouldn't want to on this if the, you know, people are doing 70, 80, 90 miles an hour around me. I wouldn't want to be kind of capped at 60, 70 miles an hour. Oh, top speed is 73 miles an hour. You know, like Supermaning it with your legs out that way, and you're holding onto the bars like you're Superman. With the stock gearing, I've actually gone down one tooth in the front, so I have a little bit more acceleration, a little bit less top speed. So my top speed is probably 68, 69 miles an hour, but for what I'm using it for, that's absolutely perfect. So if you're in between this and like a Ninja 250, 300, or a CBR 250, 300, and you're going to be commuting with it, well, I'm going to recommend the 250 or 300, but you're not. I don't see you easily learning as much, because you can take this puppy out to, I can literally go right across the street down the hill to a parking lot and just advance my skills. So that is what it is. If you got any questions, let me know. If you got a thumbs up, give me one of those.